The Madison Grove Theater glowed like a crown jewel against the night sky, its ornate balconies and archways washed in amber light. Inside, Savannah's most polished gathered to sip wine, exchange compliments wrapped in competition, and pose for cameras that made every gesture look like legacy. I stood just beyond the limestone archway, a silent observer in a charcoal suit that hadn't seen a gala in years. Far enough to be ignored, close enough to see everything. She hadn't seen me yet, but I saw her. And him. Madeline Hart, Maddie, once, looked like she'd stepped out of a portrait someone painted just to prove elegance still existed. Her velvet green dress shimmered under the terrace lights as she leaned against the railing, sipping wine like royalty on casual terms. Every angle of her was calculated, every smile practiced. A queen disguised as a woman. And beside her, laughing like a man who'd never had to earn affection, stood Colton Pierce. His laugh rang hollow, like applause dubbed over a bad sitcom. His every gesture screamed curated. The silk tie. The too perfect hair. The laugh that didn't touch his eyes. Colton was the kind of man who mistook presence for power. And Maddie? She was playing the long game. She always did. There was a time I thought I knew her. A time when she'd sketch strangers in the back of my architecture lectures, reciting poems in whispers while tracing the outline of my hand with hers. We used to dream about converting abandoned warehouses into community art hubs. Back then, she wanted to be someone whose name appeared in lights for more than just illusion. Back then, I believed in forever. I didn't come tonight for drama. I came for closure. And then, her voice, sharp as a violin out of tune, cut through the air. Still sketching buildings no one asked for? Ethan? I didn't answer. Not right away. She hadn't seen me before. Not really. Not since everything broke. Tonight, I wasn't here as the man she left. Tonight, I was someone else. A man walked up beside me, gray suit, lined face, the weariness of too many meetings stitched into his posture. A board member, I recalled. The kind of man who signs deals not with excitement, but relief. Mr. Brooks, he said, startled. Didn't expect to see you here. She didn't either, I replied calmly. He leaned in, voice dropping. I read the paperwork. So it's true. I nodded. As of last Friday, I own the majority of the Madison Grove. He blinked, swallowed. His eyes slid to the terrace, to Maddie and Colton laughing like tomorrow was already theirs. Does she know? Not yet, I said. But she will. There was a pause. Then a strange, quiet peace settled into me. Because this wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. It was about restoration. Not of buildings, but of self. The version of me she didn't think would survive. The man she underestimated. The vision she abandoned. I had spent a year rebuilding. Brick by emotional brick. And now, with the Grove under my name, she would finally understand it. I didn't need to tear her world down. I just needed to build something better. It all started with a scent. She used to wear this subtle perfume, sandalwood and a trace of jasmine. It was soft, personal, like a secret meant only for me. I'd recognize it anywhere. It clung to her scripts, her scarves, the pillow beside mine. But one afternoon, she came home wearing something else. Something bold, heady, floral with musk and rose. The kind of scent that filled a room before she spoke a word. She said it was a free sample from a castmate. I laughed, pretended not to notice. But I did. A week later, she started coming home late. Rehearsals, she said. Creative dinners with the director. Late-night read-throughs at Dana's. I offered to pick her up once or twice. She declined. Always a reason. Then came that night. I made her favorite. Lemon pasta, grilled asparagus, garlic bread, and the white wine we'd been saving for her last audition. I even drove to the Grove to surprise her between rehearsals. The stage was empty. A lighting tech told me there were no rehearsals scheduled. That Maddie was supposedly out of town for a private reading in Atlanta. I went home quietly, didn't call. The pasta was still warm. The wine sat untouched like a witness. She arrived 2 hours later, humming a tune I didn't recognize, her lipstick freshly reapplied, the scent of someone else lingering on her neck. Long rehearsal? I asked, not turning. Yeah, she said, brushing a kiss on my shoulder. Sorry I didn't text. I was in character. She was lying, and she wasn't even good at it. But Maddie had a way of spinning words like ribbon. When she couldn't deny, she deflected. When she couldn't explain, she made me the villain for not trusting her. We didn't fight. I didn't sleep. 2 days later, I found something. 2 days later, while looking for a design file on her laptop, I noticed she hadn't logged out of her messages. She usually did. Maddie guarded her digital world like a stage script, only to be seen when rehearsed. But that day, she slipped. There it was, in plain view. A conversation thread on a lesser-known private social platform. One sender stood out. C. Pierce. Colton. I didn't open the thread right away. I stared at it first. Let my breath slow. Then I clicked. The latest message read, "Last night was unforgettable. I can still feel your skin on my fingertips." Her reply came minutes later. "Ethan thinks I was at Dana's doing a script reading. He even made dinner. I feel kind of guilty." Kind of. The world didn't spin. It stopped. I didn't shout. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I just read. Line after line. Weeks of messages. Photos. Private jokes. Plans for weekends away. Laughs at my expense, at my obsession with buildings and silent moods. It was cruelty wrapped in coyness. I didn't cry. I sat still. The kind of stillness that precedes a storm. When I finally closed the laptop, I walked outside. The backyard was quiet. The sky was heavy with thick southern clouds. No stars. No moon. Just the kind of night that felt like a mirror, one that refused to lie. I didn't know exactly who Colton was yet, but I knew enough. I wasn't going to live paused anymore. Something in me had snapped, not like glass, like a chain. The next evening, she came home with high spirits and the scent of another world trailing behind her. I asked her how the rehearsal had gone. She spun a new story, something about emotional improvisation exercises. I nodded, smiled, offered her tea. She thought she had me again, but while she performed, I had already begun the next act. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I planned. That night, I reopened an old black notebook, not for sketches, for strategy. It was the notebook I used back when our client design was still an idea scribbled between late-night coffees and unfunded dreams. And it were goals I had forgotten, things I had sacrificed to hold together a marriage already collapsing under its own vanity. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Maddie slept beside me, wrapped in white sheets like she had no idea her world was cracking. Her face looked peaceful. How could she sleep through the ruins? I went to my studio, turned on the desk lamp, skimmed past the sketches for client houses. I wasn't thinking of their dreams anymore. I was thinking of mine. I powered up my laptop, opened my contacts, typed a message to Logan Reed, my longtime friend and partial business partner at Arcline. "You mentioned Beacon Capital Partners was having financial trouble." "Still true." His reply came fast. "Yeah, desperate for a brand reboot, blowing cash on sterile ad campaigns." "Why?" "Because I have an idea." He called me immediately. "Wait, you're saying you want to partner with them?" "Not exactly," I said. "I want to acquire their debt stake in the Madison Grove Theater." Silence. Then, "This about her?" I breathed in. "No, this is about me." The following week was a storm of motion. Late-night meetings, quiet negotiations, backdoor connections. I reached out to 2 former classmates from architecture school, now rising stars in urban renewal. I pitched a vision, transform Madison Grove into more than a theater. A hybrid community arts hub, performance space, learning center. They loved it. With their support and a cleverly disguised LLC, I moved to purchase Beacon's debt note, making me the quiet owner of the property's future. Every move was exact, like restoring a cathedral. Painstaking, reverent, personal. And while I orchestrated behind the scenes, Maddie seemed lighter, as if sensing change in the air but misreading it. She made breakfast some mornings, left handwritten notes on napkins, asked about my projects. "I'm trying," she'd say, but her eyes gave her away. They didn't shimmer with truth, just performance. And though I played along, offering smiles and measured responses, I was no longer in the story. I was writing a new one. Then one afternoon, I received a letter on my desk from Colton Pierce, a formal notice of investment interest through a proxy foundation into Madison Grove Theater. The same man who helped unravel my life now wanted to brand himself into the heart of the one place that still held meaning. I laughed, not from bitterness, from the pure absurdity of it all. A week later, Madeline invited me to dinner. She said we needed to reconnect, said she missed us. The version of us where I read blueprints like they were love letters, and she played the part of muse, mystery, and comfort all in one. I agreed to go. Not for nostalgia. For clarity. The restaurant she chose was one of those upscale Savannah spots, exposed brick, string lights, waiters who whispered like the air itself cost extra. The kind of place where every dish came plated like a painting, and the wine list read like a European novella. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said, slipping off her coat to reveal a crimson dress. It wasn't for me. I could tell. That version of her, the one who dressed for someone else, was always obvious to me, even when I pretended not to see it. "Sure," I said, not lifting my eyes from the menu. She sat across from me, her smile carefully placed. "I'm glad you came," she said, voice softened by red wine. "I've missed this." Us. I nodded slowly. What is this, Maddie? You and me, she said, like the words still meant something. The conversations. The laughter. The way we supported each other. That last part made me laugh. Quiet, dry, and brief. You want to hear something strange? I asked, setting my fork down, untouched. About a month ago, I found a copy of the partial ownership contract for the Madison Grove, the theater that built your career, that still houses your dreams. Her expression froze for a split second. That was her tell. I leaned back. Turns out a portion of it was collateral for Beacon's outstanding debt. The same debt I now own. Her face didn't crumble. She was better trained than that. But the smile faded, slowly, like ink bleeding into rain. Why would you do that? She asked, steady but brittle. Because I know what this place means to you, I said. Because this theater is where everything started for you, and where it's going to end. Her eyes sharpened. She was searching for footing, for a script. This doesn't have to be a war, she said quietly. It's not, I replied. You lied. You performed. I just rewrote the ending. Without you in the lead. She inhaled, trying to regain control. But it was too late. You think this is about Colton? She asked. It's not that simple. No, I said with a faint smile. It's simpler than that. It's about me. About realizing I gave everything to someone who offered presence, but never depth. I was an architect building dreams with a partner who only cared about applause. She lowered her eyes. I loved you, Ethan. Maybe, I said. In your own way. But real love doesn't feel like a constant audition. The main course arrived, but neither of us touched it. The mood had already soured. The show was over. So this is goodbye? She asked softly. No, I said. This is closure. That's not the same thing. She nodded. Maybe she understood. Maybe she just wanted to appear like she did. We left the restaurant in silence. She walked beside me to the sidewalk, shivering slightly in the southern chill. But she didn't reach for my hand. Whatever we had been, it wasn't here anymore. Before she stepped into her ride, she turned and looked at me one last time. You're right, she said. The theater was our beginning. I guess it makes sense it's also our end. I didn't answer. I just watched her go. Not with anger. Not with sorrow. With peace. Because I finally understood, I didn't need justice through her downfall. I had found it in my own resurrection. The next day, a local news site ran a small headline. Historic Madison Grove Theater announces new ownership and vision for revitalization. No name attached. Just the way I wanted it. To the world, it was just another financial transaction. But to me, it was the last line of a chapter that began long before betrayal. A way to reclaim something lost and rebuild it, stronger. The board of directors looked at me cautiously at the first official meeting. I could see the uncertainty in their eyes. Who was I? Why had I moved so fast? But I brought more than numbers. I brought vision. This place was born from passion, I told them, pointing to a revised blueprint. But you're letting it die in paperwork. I'm here to bring it back. This won't just be a theater. It'll be alive. Workshops, galleries, music, film, education. 7 days a week. A true cultural anchor. There was silence. Then one man leaned forward. And what do we get out of it? I smiled. Something money can't buy. Legacy. And yes, consistent revenue. But more than that, relevance. They voted unanimously to give me full creative control. In the weeks that followed, I walked every inch of the Madison Grove Theater. From the frayed velvet seats in the upper balcony to the dusty sublevels beneath the stage, I traced every crack, every forgotten corner, every echo of stories left unfinished. The building spoke to me, not just in the language of architecture, but in something deeper. This place, like me, had been beautiful once. And like me, it had been ignored, patched over, expected to survive on history alone. Now, both of us were under renovation. Word spread quickly about the theater's new direction. Most didn't know I was behind it. Maddie certainly didn't. She never called, never wrote, but her name still floated through the halls. One of the production assistants, young, sharp, always 3 steps ahead, mentioned that Madeline had asked around, wanted to know what the new leadership meant for her role in future seasons. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to explain. While she counted days to her next callback, I was redrawing her past in permanent ink. Logan came by one afternoon while I was reviewing stage dimensions for a multi-use platform installation. He kicked the door open the way he always did, like buildings had to be reminded who was boss. Guess who's meeting with private investors to start his own theater company? He asked. Colton Pierce, I said without looking up. He dropped into the chair across from me. Does it bother you? I closed the folder slowly. Not really. Let him try. Let her follow if she wants. Logan squinted. So this is still about you? I nodded. Always has been. He paused, looked at me like someone checking to see if a foundation had finally cured after months of hardening. Then carry on, man, he said. You're building something real. And I was. Our first major renovation was the main performance hall. I approved the removal of 2 central rows of fixed seats and replaced them with modular platforms. It allowed for different configurations: black box, thrust, arena. Theaters hate change. So do some actors. But most? They applauded. Literally. One of them stood out. Her name was Sophie Clark, early 20s, curious eyes, the kind of stage presence that didn't ask for attention but still earned it. She stayed behind after a production meeting, holding a stack of notes. This place feels different now, she said. More alive. That's the idea, I replied. She didn't ask about me, didn't pry into who owned what or who broke whose heart. She just smiled and walked back into the rehearsal hall. Sometimes, the right people don't ask for your history. They simply make space for your presence. That night, I went home and sat at the same desk where I'd once read Maddie's messages, the ones that turned love into strategy and commitment into exposure. Only this time, I wasn't seeking betrayal. I was seeking vision. I opened a new file and typed, Madison Grove, second life, second purpose. This wasn't just a structure anymore. It was a reflection, a vessel. And I was no longer a man trying to salvage something broken. I was a man shaping something entirely new. Nearly 3 months passed. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, she appeared. I had just wrapped a logistics meeting about the upcoming interactive showcase. The lobby was filled with stagehands and interns, clipboards in hand, voices bouncing between marble columns and open doors. I saw her reflection first in the glass door across the room. She stood still, wearing jeans, a beige sweater, and no makeup. She looked younger that way, or maybe just less curated. Maddie. I turned before she could speak. Hi, Ethan, she said, voice unsure. I nodded. What are you doing here? I heard there's an open call for the new production, she said. I came to audition. It's true, I said, keeping my tone neutral. But I don't handle casting. That's up to the creative director. Can I talk to you? Just 5 minutes. I looked at the clock on the wall. 3, I said. We stepped into the hallway near the storage wing, boxes of costumes, old set pieces, half-labeled containers with names of shows long gone. I know I don't have the right to ask anything of you, she began. And what I did was beyond selfish. But this place, it means everything to me. I'm not here to beg. I just wanted to know if there's still space for me here. Professionally. I paused. Why not go to Colton? Isn't he the one who wanted to boost your career? She flinched. Just a little. He left, she said quietly. Well, technically, he moved on. Someone younger. There it was. The cycle. Repeating itself. A mirror of what she'd done to me. I'm sorry, I said. Not for him. For her. Because you keep looking for identity in places that should only give you structure, not self-worth. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with the weight of recognition. You know what hurts the most? She asked. That you don't hate me. You look at me like I'm gone. I don't hate you, Maddie. But I also don't need you anymore. That hit harder than anything else I could have said. She looked at the stage. Like it might still welcome her. Can I audition? She asked finally. You can, I said. But there are no favors here. Not anymore. She nodded, then turned and walked away. This time, she didn't look back. The audition was held in the newly configured black box stage, bare floor, single spotlight, folding chairs in a semicircle. No grandeur, no production. Just words, breath, and presence. I wasn't supposed to be there. The casting director, a theater veteran named Reed Thomas, had full authority. But I lingered in the back, not out of control, but curiosity. Closure, perhaps. Maybe just to remind myself that history doesn't repeat. It auditions for a sequel. Maddie arrived right on time. She wore simple clothes. Her hair tied back. No makeup, no jewelry, no flourish. The version of her I hadn't seen since college. The version that once whispered Shakespeare into the crook of my neck during rainstorms. She performed a monologue from A Streetcar Named Desire. Her voice steady. Her expression vulnerable. It was good. Not brilliant. Not awful. Just good. Enough to remind everyone that she had once belonged here, but not enough to guarantee she still did. Then came Sophie Clark. She didn't just perform her piece. She became it. Her eyes carried years she hadn't lived. Her silence carried more weight than Maddie's best lines. She wasn't reaching for the audience. She invited them in. When the casting meeting convened later that evening, the decision was unanimous. Sophie got the lead. Maddie would be offered a supporting role, not out of pity, but accuracy. Her performance wasn't bad, it just wasn't undeniable. The cast list was posted the next morning, printed on thick paper, pinned to the bulletin board just outside the rehearsal studio. A ritual older than either of us. I passed by it hours later. She never said anything, never called, never emailed. But the next day, a large cardboard box appeared in my office. Inside, old props, some cracked masks, a tattered stage book from her early days. And at the very bottom, folded in half 4 times, was a letter. Just 1 page. Ethan, I never asked you to be my stage, but I acted like you were. And you, somehow, were my foundation. I'm sorry I built on sand. Maddie. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The silence between us was finally clean. Opening night of the new production arrived with little fanfare. No red carpet. No speeches. Just people. Real people. Families. Students. Retirees who still believed in live theater. The Madison Grove was filled, not just with an audience, but with intention. Sophie was luminous. She didn't dazzle, she anchored. Every pause was deliberate. Every glance meaningful. She didn't need to perform pain, she understood it. When the final curtain dropped, the applause wasn't explosive. It was earned. The kind that doesn't rush in. It rises. Afterward, I stood in the shadows of the balcony, the place I always belonged, not in the spotlight, but behind the structure. People passed by with warm words, grateful handshakes, compliments for the new layout, the sound design, the vibe. They didn't know I was the reason it all came back to life. That was the point. Around midnight, when the set crew began dismantling the modular panels, I slipped out into the alley behind the theater. I needed air. And that's when I saw her. Maddie, standing alone in the dim light, scarf tied around her neck, hands in her coat pockets. She wasn't made up. Her eyes were tired. Her stance quiet. Not the actress. The woman. We locked eyes. She lifted a hand, not waving, just acknowledging. I walked over slowly. She looked at the marquee, glowing faintly above us. I saw the show, she said. Didn't come to talk. Just wanted to see if it was real. It is, I said. Much more real than what we were. She nodded. Sophie was amazing. She didn't act. She just was. She didn't argue. There was a long pause. No rush. No subtext. Do you love her? She asked. No, I said honestly. But I respect her. And that matters more than what I used to call love. She smiled, a sad, small smile. Can I ask you something? I waited. Did you ever really want to hurt me? Not just take the theater. I mean, really hurt me. I thought for a moment. Yes. In the beginning. When silence was my roommate and every wall in our house still had your shadow. But eventually I realized I didn't want to see you fall. I just wanted to stop falling myself. She blinked quickly, fighting whatever tears hadn't made it out yet. You did it, she said. You built it all back. Stronger. I didn't do it to prove anything to you. I did it to remind myself I was never what you made me feel like I was. She looked down. I guess this really is the end. I shook my head gently. No, this is just the beginning. You're just not on stage anymore. She nodded, stepped back, didn't reach for a hug, didn't need to. She walked off without looking back. And for the first time, I didn't either. The weeks after the premiere felt different, not just because of the success, though the show sold out its first month, and local press called it a landmark return for the Grove. It was more personal than that. It was in the way people breathed inside the building now, like the space itself had permission to live again. Word spread. Schools started booking field trips. Local artists sent in proposals for gallery installations. A nearby college offered to partner on student workshops. Even the city council asked for a meeting about cultural funding. Madison Grove had stopped being a forgotten relic. It had become a pulse point. I, Ethan Brooks, found myself at the center of it all, not as a figurehead, but a quiet architect. The kind that didn't draw attention but made sure everyone else stood on solid ground. Logan noticed. He stopped by one Friday afternoon as I was sketching ideas for a new rehearsal wing. He leaned on the doorway, arms crossed, coffee in hand. You know, you don't look like the same guy who called me 6 months ago asking if Beacon Capital was up for sale, he said. I glanced up. That a compliment or a warning? He grinned. It's real. You used to carry everything. The firm, the marriage, the guilt. Now, you let the world move around you instead of trying to control it. I stared at the blueprint on my desk. The design was minimalist, functional, but elegant. A room that let sound breathe and ideas echo. You think I've changed that much? I asked. I think, Logan said, you finally stopped building for other people's dreams. That night, I was locking up the theater when Sophie found me outside. She had just finished a late rehearsal and was still in costume. Dusty boots, Stage makeup half faded. "Hungry?" she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. She led me to a tiny restaurant tucked into an alley I'd walked past a dozen times but never entered. No tablecloths, no reservations. Just handwritten menus and a waiter who knew her name. We sat in the corner, talked about books, city planning, and how stage lighting is basically emotional architecture. At one point, she asked quietly, "Did you ever think you'd fall in love again?" I looked at her. Not with anticipation, not with defense, just honesty. "I used to think I couldn't," I said. "But now I realize. I was just too broken to offer something real." She nodded. "And now? Now, I'm not looking for someone to fill the cracks. I've sealed them. If someone comes along, they'll meet a man who's already whole." She smiled, not flirtatiously. Respectfully. That night ended without expectation. No kiss. No promises. Just two people who didn't need to rescue each other. And that was enough. A few days later, I got a letter. This one wasn't from Maddie. It was from her sister, Clara Hart. We hadn't spoken in years. She and I had been close back in the early days, Sunday coffees, shared book recommendations, occasional vent sessions about family chaos. But after the split, she disappeared like the rest. Her letter was short. "Careful. I'm not writing to pull you back into anything. Just wanted you to know Maddie's not doing well. I'm not asking you to fix it. I just thought you should hear it from someone who still remembers the man who showed her what healthy love looked like." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because it wasn't my place anymore. Once upon a time, I would have rushed in, sketched a plan, tried to design her a way out of her own damage. But I wasn't that man now. Some people don't want to be saved. They just want someone to hold their hand as they sink. And I learned I wasn't built for drowning anymore. That Sunday, I took a walk through downtown Savannah. No music, no phone, just me, the sound of the river, and the crunch of leaves beneath my boots. I passed by the cafe where Logan and I used to meet before boardroom battles. Walked by the bookstore where Maddie and I once picked out a volume of Tennessee Williams she never read. But I didn't feel haunted. I felt free. I stepped into a little shop on River Street. In the window was a book called Spaces That Heal, a collection of essays on how architecture could restore more than cities. It could restore people. I smiled, not because I needed the reminder, but because I realized something important. I was one of those spaces. I had healed. Not perfectly, not permanently, but enough. That night, I returned to the theater. It was after hours, the lobby dim except for a single light left on above the entryway. The kind of light that says someone still cares here. I unlocked the side door and walked the familiar halls. No rush, no destination, just movement, memory, reverence. The backstage area was quiet, but still warm with the day's energy. The kind that lingers in spaces where passion has just finished speaking. I stepped onto the main stage. The house was dark, seats empty, no one clapping, no one watching. And yet, I felt seen, not by an audience, by myself. I sat in one of the folding chairs that hadn't been put away yet, closed my eyes, listened to the faint hum of silence that only old buildings know how to make. Then I wrote. I pulled out my notebook, black leather, pages warped from time and weather, and I scribbled a single line. This isn't about applause anymore. It's about authorship. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't chasing the next big thing, or someone's approval, or proof that I was enough. I simply was. The next day marked the one-year anniversary of when I signed the agreement that gave me control of the Madison Grove. No gala, no press. I woke up early, poured a mug of black coffee, and took a walk. Savannah was soft that morning. Mist curled around the trees, and the brick sidewalks glistened like they remembered rain. The world didn't feel heavy. It felt full. A year ago, I walked into a storm trying to hold together a love that had already left me. Now I walked like a man who no longer heard echoes. I passed the cafe where Logan and I used to brainstorm names for Arcline design. I nodded at the barista who still spelled my name wrong on the cup. I smiled when I passed the Riverwalk where Maddie once kissed me under an umbrella, thinking that meant forever. But none of those places pulled at me. They just existed. And so did I. Later that afternoon, I met with the Grove's education director to discuss community programs. We talked about partnerships with local schools, theater apprenticeships, architecture internships. Real integration. Real impact. Then Sophie stopped by. She brought coffee. Said she wanted my thoughts on a workshop idea about how architecture and acting both rely on tension and release. The kind of cross-pollination Maddie never would have considered. We talked for an hour, maybe more. She never asked about my past. She asked about possibility. That night, I received a short message from her. Your story is inspiring more people than you realize. Just keep building. I didn't write back. I just closed my eyes, leaned back in my office chair, and let the silence settle over me like a well-fitted coat. Because she was right. I wasn't a survivor anymore. I was a builder again. A week later, I returned to the stage alone. Same chair, same spotlight, different soul. I looked out at the empty house, thought about every version of myself that had ever sat here, the romantic, the skeptic, the dreamer, the broken man pretending to hold up his world with blueprints. And I realized something. I didn't need another act. I just needed to keep writing, not for an audience, but because authors don't write for applause. They write because their story demands a page. I reached for my notebook again and wrote the closing line for that chapter. She wanted to be the applause, but I chose to be the author. Then I turned off the light and walked home. Weeks passed like water, quiet, steady, reshaping without force. Maddie didn't return. Not to the Grove. Not to me. Clara sent one more letter. Shorter this time. Just a line, really. She's moved out of the city. Trying to write now. Something about grief and identity. I didn't ask for more. I didn't need it. Maddie was a chapter. One that had been beautiful, brutal, and absolutely necessary to finish. Some stories don't need a dramatic end. They just need to end. Meanwhile, the Grove kept blooming. Every show sold out. The new education wing opened with a week of workshops led by local creators. Teenagers painted murals on the back wall. Seniors hosted spoken word nights in the studio space. We weren't just producing art. We were cultivating presence. I stayed behind the scenes. Always preferred foundation to spotlight. But I listened. I watched. People laughed here now. Hugged. Failed and tried again. That meant more to me than applause ever could. Logan stopped by with 2 coffees and news from the outside world. Pierce's new theater concept tanked, he said. Investors pulled out after the 3rd delay. Rumors of internal fights. Press is already calling it a cautionary tale. I raised an eyebrow. And Maddie? He shrugged. Radio silence. Word is, she didn't follow him. I didn't react. Because some endings don't sting anymore. They just settle. I saw Sophie more often, too. Not on purpose. Not out of romance. Just rhythm. She'd swing by with ideas, books, bad coffee from the vending machine downstairs. She didn't try to impress. She just existed. And that made her rare. One night, she asked if I'd ever thought about designing a permanent gallery space on the 2nd floor, something immersive, like architecture that talks back. People think structure is static, she said. But it's not. It listens. I stared at her for a second, amazed at the quiet clarity. You might have made a better architect than I did, I said. She laughed. I'm just trying to feel things that last longer than applause. That night, after she left, I pulled out a new sketch pad. I didn't draw a gallery. I drew a person. A silhouette. Alone, upright, holding nothing, but standing anyway. That's who I had become. Someone who didn't build to prove. Someone who built to stand. A few days later, a small local publisher asked to include the Grove in a book about the cultural revival of southern cities. They wanted to feature its transformation, not just the space, but the intention. They interviewed our education director, one of our student volunteers, even Sophie. When they asked to speak with me, I hesitated, but I said yes. The reporter was soft-spoken, professional. She asked about the renovations, the community programs, the decision to go modular with the main hall. Then she asked, was this always the plan? I looked around the theater, the new lighting rig, the echo of laughter in the hallway, the student artwork pinned to the bulletin board near the stairs. No, I said. None of it was. But it feels intentional, she said. It is, I answered. Sometimes life falls apart just so you can choose what pieces to rebuild. The rest, you let go. She nodded, as if she'd heard the same thing from someone else once. Maybe from herself. That night, I walked the long way home. The air smelled like oak and brick and river silt. I passed the theater and didn't look back. Not because it didn't matter, but because I trusted it now. It no longer needed watching. It stood, like me. The past had stopped following me. And the future? It no longer felt like something I needed to brace for. It felt like something I could build. Exactly 1 year. That's how long it had been since I stepped into Beacon Capital's office and signed the agreement that made me co-owner of the Madison Grove. 1 year since the man I used to be stood at a crossroads, holding nothing but disappointment and a quiet, burning need to become someone new. I didn't plan anything to mark the date. No celebration. No speeches. Instead, I gave myself the morning off, poured a fresh cup of coffee, stepped outside, and walked. No destination. Just me and Savannah breathing. The streets were warm, shaded by trees older than the buildings they guarded. The sidewalks were uneven, the bricks never quite lining up, but that was part of the charm. Nothing perfect, everything enduring. I passed the bookstore where Maddie once tried to find meaning in lines she never finished. I passed the park bench where Logan once told me I wasn't broken, I was just unfinished. And I passed the alley where Sophie taught me that silence doesn't always mean absence. Sometimes, it's presence in its purest form. But mostly, I just walked with no ghosts. Only gratitude. Later that day, back at the Grove, the building was humming. A school group was touring the stage. A local poet was setting up for that evening's reading. In the rehearsal hall, music echoed, part improv, part miracle. I stood at the balcony railing for a moment, just watching, not managing, just being. Logan passed by and nodded. "You're not the same guy who stood here 12 months ago," he said. "I know. And you're not trying to be him again?" "No," I said, smiling. "I'm someone new. Or maybe, just more me than ever." Later that week, I was cleaning out the back office, a closet I hadn't touched since the renovation began, when I found a box labeled in sharp, dramatic script, Hard, M. Inside, old playbills, annotated scripts, a broken compact mirror, and a small photo. The two of us, smiling. Early days. No weight in our eyes yet. I stared at it for a long time. Then I slid it back into the box, taped it shut, and wrote a note on the top. Not a mistake. Just a lesson. I set the box aside for storage. I didn't throw it away. But I also didn't need to open it again. A few nights later, Sophie invited me to a small dinner. Nothing formal. She made soup. We talked about the intersection of emotion and form, about how theater and architecture are both about what's unseen, what supports everything quietly. At one point, she asked, "Do you think the world notices when someone heals?" I paused. "No," I said, "but I think the world responds to it." She smiled and raised her glass. "To whatever comes next." I didn't flinch. For the first time in a long time, the phrase, "what comes next," didn't feel like pressure. It felt like potential. That night, when I returned to the Grove to lock up, I walked the full length of the building once more. Backstage, lighting booth, balcony, green room. Each corner of it felt more like a conversation now than a memory, more like a partner than a project. When I reached the stage, I sat in the center. No lights, no sound, just stillness. I opened my sketchbook and wrote a final note on a page already half filled with blueprints. She wanted to be the applause. I chose to be the author. And this is my prologue. Then I stood, walked off stage, and turned out the lights. Not because I was done, but because the best parts of any story start in the quiet. And this story, my story, was just getting started.